What if the soldier you yelled at today was fighting a far bigger war than the one you see? Tonight, I will tell you a story about a young woman who carried a secret heavier than her rifle, and a general whose cold heart was forced to melt when he followed her home and found the truth waiting in the shadows. They say an army is only as strong as its weakest link. But what if the weakest link isn't weak at all, just breaking quietly where no one can see? The sun scorched the parade ground that day, baking the earth until the air shimmered. Boots struck the ground in unison, left, right, left, a symphony of discipline and power. Rifles caught the sunlight like shards of steel. Orders cracked like whips across the field. And there, among the rigid rows of soldiers, one figure faltered. Private Leah Morgan's step slipped, not enough to topple her, but enough to catch the sharp eyes of the man every soldier feared and respected, General Ethan Hayes. Private Morgan! The voice roared across the field like thunder rolling down a mountain. Leah froze, her hands tight on her rifle, heart pounding in her throat. What is this? Do you think this is a playground? Stand straight. Eyes forward. Focus, or I'll have you running laps until your legs give out. Yes, sir. Her voice came out stronger than her trembling hands felt. She straightened, jaw tight, willing her body to obey even as her spirit sagged under the weight of his words. To the rest of the unit, it was nothing. A small error, a sharp correction, and the march resumed. But for Leah, that single moment clung to her like a cold shadow. Every stomp of her boot echoed with the sting of humiliation. Every drop of sweat on her brow felt like a tear she couldn't afford to shed. By the time the drill ended, the sky was painted with orange streaks of a dying sun. Soldiers joked, laughed, and slung their rifles over their shoulders as they filed out. But Leah moved quickly, head down, clutching a plain white paper sack from the mess hall as if it were a lifeline. She didn't see the eyes that followed her. General Hayes should have gone home. His day was done. Report signed, drills completed, reputation intact. But something gnawed at him. It wasn't her mistake that lingered. It was her silence afterward. The way her shoulders had drooped, the way her fingers had clutched that sack, the way her eyes never quite met anyone else's. So, when he saw her walking down the narrow road that led away from the base, her steps quick but heavy, he hesitated. And then he followed. Not close, just enough to see her figure framed by the sinking sun, the paper sack swinging at her side. Her sleeve brushing at her face now and then as though wiping away something she didn't want the world to see. The road changed as they walked. Pavement gave way to cracked sidewalks. Neatly trimmed lawns faded into wild, overgrown patches. The houses grew older, their paint peeling, their windows dim. Leah's pace slowed. She paused once beneath a tree, gripping the sack tight, as though steadying her breath. Hayes stayed in the shadows, boots quiet, breath measured. What was he doing? Generals didn't follow privates home. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't proper. But something told him this was not a matter of protocol. It was a matter of humanity. When she reached a weathered apartment block, its bricks faded by time and its steps uneven with age, she climbed the stairwell with a slouch that no drill sergeant could ever fix. The door creaked as she entered. And then silence. Almost. Through the thin evening air, Hayes heard it, faint but unmistakable, a sob. He should have turned back. He should have gone home. But he stayed. Because that sound, small, fragile and aching, did not belong to a soldier failing her duty. It belonged to a human being carrying a weight the parade ground would never see. The hallway smelled of dust and old paint. General Hayes stood in the shadows, one hand brushing the cool wall, listening. Inside there was the rustle of a paper sack, the soft creak of a chair, and then a voice. "Leah, is that you?" It was frail, trembling, the kind of voice that carried both love and pain in the same breath. "Yes, Mama," Leah answered quickly, forcing strength into her tone. "I brought dinner." Hayes edged closer, his heart thudding in a way it hadn't on any battlefield. Through a small gap in the curtain, the truth unfolded. The apartment was small, one room worn thin by time, a chipped table at its center, an old sofa against the wall, and in the bedroom doorway, a fragile figure lying on a narrow bed. Leah set the bag down without touching her own food. She pulled out a simple meal, a soup, a bread roll, a small container of fruit, and carried it to the woman with hands that had learned to be gentle. Her mother's cheeks were sunken, her skin pale against the pillow, and bag hanging from a crooked stand that looked more borrowed than owned. "You're late," her mother whispered, though her eyes were kind. "I know, Mama," Leah replied softly. "Training ran long. I'm sorry. You're doing too much." Leah knelt beside the bed, spooning the soup gently. "Don't say that, please. We don't have anyone else." Hayes' breath caught. The soldier he had barked at today, the one he had thought was careless, was carrying a weight far heavier than her pack. As the evening deepened, Leah cleaned the room with quiet efficiency, washed the dishes, helped her mother with her medicine, and only then allowed herself to sit. Her shoulders sagged. The rifle was gone, the uniform folded over a chair, and in its place was a daughter, tired, young and worn. She whispered then, thinking no one heard. "I can't do this much longer. I try to focus, but my mind is always here. The general yelled at me today. I deserved it, but I'm so tired, Mama. I don't sleep. Don't eat. I'm terrified they'll send me home, and then we'll have nothing." Her mother reached a weak hand, stroking her hair. "You're the strongest person I know." But Leah shook her head. "No, I'm not strong. I'm breaking." In the hallway, General Hayes clenched his jaw. His chest felt tight, not with anger this time but with something deeper, rawer. He had commanded men in war zones, made decisions that sent soldiers into the fire. He had handed out medals for courage. But this quiet battle, fought on cracked floors and sleepless nights, this was a war he had never learned to see. He stayed until the apartment fell silent, until her mother slept, until Leah curled up on the floor beside the bed, knees tucked to her chest, too tired even to touch her own dinner. Only then did he leave. His boots on the pavement felt heavier than any gear he had ever carried. Tears stung his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in decades. Not because he was weak but because now he understood. Some soldiers fight with rifles. Others fight with nothing but their will. And they bleed in silence where no one applauds. The dawn broke cold and pale over the parade ground. Soldiers stood in formation, their boots crisp against the gravel, their breath fogging in the early air. Leah Morgan stood among them, her shoulders square, her hands steady, but her eyes heavy with the weight of a night spent without rest. She braced herself. She expected the same voice, the sharp, unyielding tone that had cut her down the day before. But General Ethan Hayes didn't shout. He walked down the line slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, eyes passing over the rows of uniforms. When his gaze landed on Leah, he stopped. For a moment, there was no parade ground, no drill, no other soldier. Only the memory of a dim room, a frail mother, and a daughter carrying the weight of 2 lives. "Private Morgan," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost human. "Fall out." A murmur rippled through the line. Leah stepped forward, nerves twisting in her chest. She expected punishment. Instead, Hayes motioned toward the office. Inside, the door closed with a quiet click. Hayes stood by the window, watching the morning sun rise over the base. "You've been carrying something," he said finally. "And I was too blind to see it." Leah froze, unsure how much he knew. "You remind me of a soldier I once knew," he continued. "He fought on 2 fronts, one for his country and one no one ever saw. I gave him medals for one, but I ignored the other. And I have regretted it ever since." Leah lowered her gaze. "Sir, I'm sorry for yesterday. I know I failed." "No," Hayes said, turning to face her. "You didn't fail. You stood your ground when the world was pulling you apart." From that day forward things changed. He arranged for her shifts to allow her time at home. He made sure a medic visited her mother quietly, off the record. He found ways, subtle ways, to ease her burden without making her feel pitied. But more than that, he carried her story with him. Every time he raised his voice after that, he remembered her eyes. Every time he spoke of strength, he spoke differently, because he now knew that strength wasn't just measured by the march, the rifle, the salute. It was measured by the nights someone spent holding a fragile life together. Months later, Leah's mother improved with steady care. Leah began to sleep again, to eat again, to smile again. Her salute grew sharper, her steps lighter, not because her life was easy, but because someone had seen her battle and chosen not to look away. One evening, as the sun set over the base, Hayes passed her on the field. She paused, saluted, and for the first time he saluted back, not as a general to a private, but as one soldier to another. Because sometimes, the bravest soldiers are not the ones who storm the front lines. They are the ones who go home after the parade, carry their families, hide their pain, and return the next morning, still standing. And that's the story of Leah Morgan, one soldier among many, but a reminder to us all. Never assume someone's weakness when you haven't seen the weight they carry. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. More stories like this are waiting for you.